and welcome, Coach's Corner. And today I am absolutely thrilled and honored to allow families from across the country to kind of gain some insight as to the world of travel baseball when it first began. We could think back to the time of dinosaurs roaming the earth and lots of no social media, no cell phones, things of that nature, just pure love, passion for the sport of baseball and people that ran it and were passing the baton of baseball knowledge uh, along to the younger high school and junior high student athletes. Today, I am joined by legendary high school coach in Massachusetts, Frank Niles. Now, Frank and I go back many, many decades with regard to playing against each other. And I played against two hitters that in my lifetime, right-handed version and left-handed version. Left-handed version was Rich Rosano, played for Ronnie's Rex in Worcester League. And the other was a guy by the name of Frank Niles, who we're talking to today in Weymouth. And Frank could hit a baseball almost as good from the right side as Wade Boggs did on the left side. So, Frank, thank you for joining me today. It's an absolute pleasure and honor to have you with me today.
Well, thanks for having me here, Walter, and thanks for those kind words. I'm not sure how accurate they are, but thank you.
I know they're accurate because there was never a man that could be down 0-2, 1-2, and you still think you didn't have him, and he'd flip a single into right center, and you just say, how did he get to that pitch? But I really want to talk to folks today with your help about baseball back in the 70s and 80s and how it kind of led to, in its infinite form, the travel baseball world. You and I played, as we alluded to in our discussion earlier, we played in the Boston Parks League. We played Stan Musial baseball. But at that time, and I would like you to talk to a little bit about it, was high school baseball and American Legion. Those were the kings. Would you agree?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. They were everything to us. As soon as that high school season ended, you were ready to dive into your Legion team, and that had college freshmen on it because a lot of 18-year-olds were college freshmen in those days. So the ante kind of went up, and Legion ball was excellent. Yeah.
And I remember when I played Legion, I faced Ronnie Darling and a couple of other guys who went on to play in the big leagues. And, the Legion baseball back then, you legitimately had to be not only one of the better athletes on your high school team, but in that region where the four teams that Legion's programs operated and kind of had as their player selection list. And ultimately it grew. Kind of American Legion grew in stature, kind of, I would say, peaking in the late 70s through the mid 80s. And then there kind of came this kind of wave of initial travel baseball, more along the lines of a little bit younger than Legion baseball, probably in that junior high, middle school area. And I know that you were at the forefront of that with the South Shore Baseball Club back in the late 70s and 80s or early 80s and mid 80s. I'd like you to tell some folks about how it got started and why.
Well, here in New England, Jay Davidson had the New England Mariners, and he was like the first guy. And he recruited guys from the entire area, from all of New England. And he had excellent teams, and they went and played in national tournaments, and he did quite well. And the number of teams sometimes out there, even in the national tournaments, weren't that great. But he had excellent teams. And we had a baseball club, South Shore Baseball Club, with a lot of good players there. But at that time, we were just doing memberships and clinics and camps and summer camp and year-round stuff, indoors and out. And our best players were starting to drift and go try out for these teams. That first there was the New England Mariners, then the Lightning. And so after about 4 years of seeing that happen, the demand was there for us to do a similar thing. So we started to do travel teams or have tryouts for what we called the Sea Dogs. And it was very popular, and you could attract lots of good players, especially if you put out a good product. And you really had elite teams, and we were not every team all about, I wouldn't say, but we traveled to competitive national tournaments. So you were putting together something that was travel, families going on the road. Most of our teams back in those days got on an airplane, went to a national tournament, and played. Saw great players and great teams, and did well sometimes, and got knocked out in a hurry sometimes. I remember telling people we finished first because we lost 2 games and we're heading home, and people didn't understand that was always popular.
Right.
Um, but slowly but surely over time, as that sort of burgeoned, there were more and more national tournaments to choose from, or things became more competitive. And you could go to, after a while, you could go to national tournaments and not find national quality there. And people also got accustomed to traveling and going to national tournaments. So after a while, some of the shine wore off of that, and then teams popped up everywhere. Um, what we sometimes called mom and pop teams. It's the same in every level of baseball. If you're not the shortstop or starting or hitting third, maybe your dad starts his own team. I don't know, whatever.
Well, the
Um,
days of competing for roster spots. At what do you remember approximately the year? And when you mentioned the Lightning, I just want to give people some perspective. John Tudor and Dave Betancourt, who were high school teammates at Peabody High. John Tudor went on to pitch in the big leagues for many years, Pirates, Cardinals, etc. And he ran the Lightning. And that was kind of in the latter 80s, early 90s, would you say? Was that kind of the ballpark
um,
time?
Boy, that's I think at least the mid '80s, and maybe later on the Lightning. It didn't have Betancourt and Tudor then, but it's hard for me to pinpoint the years as I get older. I know how old my older brothers are, but my younger ones, I'm guessing. The
Well, I want to
sign of
say
the age.
if
But um, yeah, those guys were there. I think it was late '80s because, or even into the early '90s. Although a lot of people bounce around too, they don't stay in one place.
what were some of the early national championships that you can remember, or national events, I guess is the best way to put it. What were
Uh,
some of the cities, or where were some of those games held?
well, we went to a lot of tournaments in Georgia with East Cobb. We went to Florida and Disney. Uh, I coached a 15-year-old team that won a national invitational tournament in Kingsport, Tennessee, that had about 6 kids that were drafted and played pro ball. We were 15 at the time. That had Jason Delaney, who just a couple of weeks ago went into the Boston College Athletic Hall of Fame. Had Mark Rosen and Ryan Morgan, and had about 6. They're a really talented team. But we've been, we used to joke like that Johnny Cash song. We've been everywhere. Not as much anymore, but we used to go to San Diego to an 18 and under tournament every year. Back in the days when we had Mike Spinelli and David Lightbody, we would attract kids from the Cape or from New Hampshire or North Shore. Revere kids would be down. Plenty of Rhode Island kids. We had Rick Del Vecchio coaching an older team that traveled every year. That for us has slowed down a lot because you can't. It's hard to get all the best players together. So some organizations are still doing that or trying to do that.
Well, I know that back in the day, it was really a prestigious honor if you got an invite from the Sea Dogs. I absolutely remember the Mariners. In fact, I remember Tyler competing against them back in the early 2000s, and obviously the Lightning. In today's world, you don't really have that tryout for the best talent. You kind of have these, as you allude to them, and I also alluded to these programs, mom and pop kind of created their own teams, and at the basic forms they were little league all-star teams that kind of would stick together through the ages of 12 through like 14, 15, etc., and then ultimately break apart and find their way to some of the bigger programs. Have you recently seen not only a decline with regard to the caliber of play, But as far as the number of teams trying to head to those tournaments, like Georgia or in Florida, have you kept it more regional in recent years?
We have kept it more regional. We've had teams that grew up together and stayed together, and through a natural process, some dropped off and some added on, and they were really good and they could compete at those kind of tournaments. But that doesn't happen as often for us as it used to. So I believe across the board it's thinned out a little bit, or more than a little bit, probably. I'm not sure everybody would be ready to admit that. But
I
there's
am.
organizations too that are only doing high-end attempt at travel baseball. So, we're a membership club where it's like a health club for baseball players. And have a lot of younger age group guys. We still do a summer camp for 5 weeks that averages about 150 kids a week. So we don't focus just on travel teams, although, we love them. Um, in a way, it's a better thing because people, to me, were looking for something more than their local town teams. So there's definitely kids who 15 years ago probably couldn't have been on a travel team, but they're out there and they're playing and they're practicing and they're training in the winter, and they definitely get better. Are we making major leaguers? Well, I've never really thought that. No, we're not. But some will get there. But hopefully, we're making good kids, good citizens, good grown-ups.
Well,
And
that's
and
the
to
end
me,
game
it's
for the grown
nice
up.
to it's really great to alleviate the madness of the world because there's a lot of pressure out there. My high school kids think they're in a pressure cooker at Hingham High School. So I like to give them 2.5 hours of shut it down and practice baseball, play baseball, try to be good. But, you know,
What do you think the biggest difference? Just even let's go back to our days to today with regard to like my experience is this. I don't see a lot of younger athletes that have favorite players or favorite teams. I don't see a lot of boys watching a lot of baseball. I see the instinct of a student athlete kind of slipping backwards a little bit. What would you say is the biggest difference? I mean, the game is still the same, but what's the biggest difference between, let's say, 70s, 80s, and 90s into the 2000s? What's the biggest difference?
well, we grew up playing baseball and mostly learning it on our own within
Right.
reason. We got to go play at the park. Kids today, they grow up in protective custody. They couldn't be left at the park all day long. It's part of why we have summer camp so that they can do something like it that is safe and organized enough. But I'd like to get out of the way and let them settle their own differences and have arguments like we did.
Right.
Me and my brothers in the backyard. If you could survive my backyard, the games were nothing.
I know that.
But kids definitely are watched over too much. I feel bad for them because they're told what to do, when to do it, what they can't do, what they're doing well, and I find it much more difficult to, for instance, teach a high school player how to run the bases when all the other decisions in his life are made by somebody else. And so they're not accustomed to ground ball. They're on first, get a good secondary lead, ground ball to left, turn the base hard, and make your own decision. It's amazing how many times my answer when a coach says, "Well, when a player asks, what should I do in that situation the next time?" I said, try being athletic, alert, on the move with momentum, and make your own decision. And if you're out, you're out. But
Right.
so
I agree 1,000% with that, and I'm going to give you my little tidbit thought because when I was coaching in college and going back into like the early 2000s, and I started to see it then. Travel baseball, the business now side of it, has mandated that we go, and I know these ages sound cuckoo, 6U, 7U, 8U, 9U. When we were kids and you were in Little League and you were 10, you were playing against 11 and 12-year-olds. When you played Babe Ruth and you were 13, you were playing against and with 14 and 15-year-olds. American Legion, you were 15, you were a freshman or a sophomore, probably more likely, and you were playing against college freshmen. But now today, student athletes don't look up and say, wow, I see how he's moving. I see how aggressive he is. Now everything is calculated, organized, structured, predetermined, pool play, championship play, World Series. Can you speak to the fact that when a parent shoots back and says, I don't want my 10-year-old to play with a 12-year-old, he could get hurt? That's the problem, in my opinion. Would you agree?
Yeah, it's a problem. It's not the whole problem, but there's way too many limitations put on kids. Whereas, if you let them go play, and one kid gets hit in the face with a fastball, and the whole league has to wear a shield.
Right.
We're from the society says you have to wear a seatbelt. It doesn't say we have to teach you how to drive the automobile. It's insanity. So, but kids are still kids, and good kids are good kids. And that's why what you have to try to do is create a culture that you can overcome what happens at home so that the excuses fall to the wayside. And if a kid has a complaint, come and talk to me about it. Talk to me. I'll listen to you. And that happens, a lot. But your parents shouldn't be there doing your bidding. If I could do one thing, I'd wave a magic wand and have parents understand that the kid's got to find his own way and let him go do it. Because most of those kids are bright and they're talented, and they'll figure it out better than their parents will sometimes. But you have to create a culture where the excuses are gone, where the practice time is you practice hard, but you're not afraid to have fun doing it.
Right.
And catching the baseball matters in practice. It matters in games. If I'm coaching third base and I miss a ground ball, I'm not happy. Even today, I prefer to try to catch them. It's an old habit. And if I don't, what's wrong with me? So I don't know if I'm rambling or what.
No, you're not rambling. You're nailing it. And I really think this is good perspective. A lot of parents will find their way to the video, and I think it's a good resource for families to understand the sport really has not changed. It's the same premise. It's the same foundation. You're trying to defensively catch and throw the baseball, get outs, and offensively, you're trying to put balls in play, move runners around, and score runs. And go ahead. I know you have. Go ahead.
What's different today is that I grew up thinking, what can I do today to help my team win?
Bingo.
That we cared about winning collectively as a group. And so if I needed to boost you as my teammate, that's what I was ready to do. If we won an important game and I went 0 for 4, there's no doubt that in my mind I said, I'm glad we won, but tomorrow I'm going to make up for that. Why wasn't I getting it? What didn't I do that I'm capable of doing? So win or lose, you assess things and you say, how can I be better tomorrow? But now the world is, the kids are, they're commodities, and the world and the parents think they're involved in an if-then proposition. If I do this, if I spend this money, if I get you in front of this person at the showcase, there's a mindset that somehow Nolan Ryan got the right instruction. And that's why he threw 100 miles an hour with 7 or 8 no-hitters, whatever it was. And it's insanity because if you have talent and you can play, you don't fall through the cracks.
Amen.
That's
the bottom line. You don't fall through a crack.
Try striking out 14 guys, a couple starts in a row, and see what happens. People hear, they know right away.
The word travels because coaches know coaches. The baseball world is extremely small. Someone that you have never heard of knows someone that's either a scout, a coach, someone that's going to open a door. Heck, Lenny Murillo, who I know he just wandered into a game where he was scouting a pitcher and saw me hitting. And so you just never know at what time and what day you're going to be scouted. But at the end of the day, you just nailed it. It's a world of me, and a world that should be full of we. My old high school baseball coach used to just have a T-shirt that said "Winners execute," and that was it. And on the front it said "we," and on the back it said "me," and that meant make excuses. So winners execute, losers make excuses. There's no such thing as having a bad day when your team wins. But yet in today's world, we're cutting video, we're putting music to it, we're trying to send it out. This is my statistics, my game changer stats, my exit velo, my swing velocity. I used to always say, if you're a good hitter, you're making consistent contact on the barrel and you're squaring up more than you're swinging and missing. In today's world, we just want to know, how's my swing look? What
Yep.
did you see? What did you not see? And I just
My
think there's
exit
over
velocity.
analytical when it comes to hitting. And I used to always tell every guy that I ever coached in college, I put the 9 best bats between the white lines. Whoever I feel gives us the best opportunity to win that day, that can swing the bat, I'll find you a position, I promise you.
Yep.
Now, I'd like to ask you on the final question. And you said it earlier, but I really want you to kind of hammer it home. If you could wave, if somebody said, okay, Coach Niles, we're going to give you the magic wand and you can make any changes you want within youth baseball, what's the one thing that you would want parents and student athletes to fully hear you say and understand?
Can't do it in one thing.
Okay, give me 2.
But if I had a magic wand, I'd wave it. I'd want kids to be able to find their own way. I would want kids to have joy, because joy is what creates great
Amen.
achievement. And so if it's not fun, if you're doing it for some other reason, you're gonna have a shelf life. So practice has to be fun, games have to be fun. It's a game of failure, but you have to have loads of repetitions and celebrate a routine play, not the Sports Center play, because you catch the ball consistently, lots of problems will go away. I say often, I can't be a smart coach unless you guys can catch the ball. So, it's got to be fun, and you got to be able to do a lot of it, and care about your team, and get better one day at a time. In baseball, you can't fool anybody. You can get lucky one day, but you can't get lucky for a week or a season.
Right.
Remember the old days when we were hundreds of miles away playing, and everybody you couldn't look up the stats.
Right.
And everybody would say, I'm hitting the ball hard, but right at people. Well, that's everybody's story.
If I could go back to those days of competing both in the Parks League and Stan Musial, and it wasn't so much about competing against guys such as yourself and having teammates. It was the people from like the 40s and 50s that when I was a kid, they'd be in their 60s, 70s, in some cases 80s. The stories they would tell about the Park League and Stan Musial ball in its infancy, and they shared just a love and a passion. And that's why we played. Heck, I played till I was 39. I don't know how long you played.
Well,
and then I got into coaching. So, I mean, the thing is that I woke up every day just saying, I want to play, I want to practice, I want to get better. Not for any other reason other than I just wanted to make sure that I was giving my best to the sport. I know that sounds cliche, but I didn't try to wear an O for a month. Okay, you're 0 for 4 tomorrow. I got to square things up. I got to put a ball in play. I get a little bit more aggressive early in counts. And at the end of the day, at the end of the season, look up and say, I had a pretty good year, whatever. But, I didn't make any money. I didn't lose any money playing baseball. I left it all between the lines. I wish kids would just kind of take a little bit of that energy, that nostalgia, and kind of put it back into today's game.
At the same time, there's an awful lot of great kids out there playing baseball.
Oh, yeah. Ton.
And there's still a good kid today is not unlike a good kid from when you and I were back there doing it. And they want to play, and they'd like to play a lot. I just wish that they weren't afraid of getting missed, that they would just play where they are. And travel teams are good. When they get criticized, I get a little defensive because I've been at it forever. It's changed some, but I mean, the more kids that play, the better off it is. Like our baseball club is a neighborhood, but we got to bring them in from, a 15-mile radius or something to get them there. But then they're kids that just want to play.
Right.
And good, my high school kids are great kids. I love them, and they want to play ball. But you got to create a culture where they get it in a healthy manner. And, oh, man, it's not the umpire's fault. I say if the umpire was any good, he wouldn't have our game. and that ends a lot of discussion, and it's the truth.
It is the truth. And you are right. Today's world, no different from an athletics perspective. I just feel, as you alluded to earlier in discussion, they feel pressure as freshmen and sophomores because they're not being recruited. And I
Yeah.
always try to tell those high school kids, hey, your junior and senior year, that's all we're working towards. Don't worry about who's committing and who's not committing as a freshman in high school or sophomore in high school. Work hard to simply get better and have a passion and a love. They'll find you. I promise you, there'll be enough people that'll watch you play that'll be able to say, hey, that's a talented young man. But I feel like you alluded to a lot of pressure on families trying to keep up with the Joneses, for lack of a better term, trying to commit, freshmen and sophomores. So, Frank, I want to say thank you because you really, truly embody all that is right with the sport of baseball, both at the high school level, the youth level. You've been doing it for decades. I know that. I've been able to watch from afar, and as a fan of you as a player, remember vividly our games at the old Weymouth Elks Field, left field apartment building, and again, you were one of the best hitters I ever saw, bar none. And I saw a lot of good right-handed hitters, but you were one of the best. So thank you, Frank. Thank you for everything that you shared today with us. I know people are going to ask me, so you might as well tell them. I know you're not a big social media person, but how could somebody reach you if they had a question pertaining to the South Shore Baseball Club?
They can email me at niles@ssbc.com. I'm on Twitter, but I don't remember what my handle is.
I'll put it in the description for you, but I want to say thank you for taking the time today. I apologize earlier. We had a little fender bender in the fog, but we got that resolved. But Frank, thank you as always for being an ambassador to the sport of baseball as well as South Shore Baseball Club.
All right, great. Thank you. And
thanks,
good luck
Frank.
to your kid. Good luck to your kid.
He's a free agent. So I think we're going to be, in for some fun this upcoming season because he's got a few teams interested in him.
Good.
And I know he'd like to come back with a vengeance. So I appreciate it very much, Frank. Thank you for talking about Tyler.
Right.
And anybody that wants to reach out to Coach Niles, send him an email. Look down below in the comment section and the description. I'll have his Twitter handle. If you like today's conversation, please subscribe and like. Any comments or questions, put them down below and we'll make sure that we answer them. Thank you, Frank.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks, bud.